Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Radio Mike, very close to the 1,000 subscriber mark. I think I'm on 951. If you want to be one of the last 49 people to get me up to the 1,000, that would be absolutely awesome. Guys, this is episode 2 of What I Watched, which is my monthly film vlog that I'm going to do at the start of each month, reflecting on all of the movies that I watched in the month just past. If you haven't seen the January edition of this yet, go and check it out on my channel, but this is all of the movies that I watched in February. I will be walking through each of them and talking about how I felt about them. And of course, I log all of the movies that I watch on Letterboxd, so if you want to check out some reviews, go and follow me over on Letterboxd now, which is a really fun way of making movies a bit more social and talking about them in a bit more detail online. So this month was really varied in the movies that I watched, and I watched a total of 15 movies over the month of February, which is really cool. That's probably over one movie every 2 days, which is great. I want to watch more movies this year, and this is a great way to kind of hold myself accountable and do it. Lots of different movies and different kinds of movies here. Some of them that I had watched before and rewatched, some that I watched for the first time and really enjoyed, and some that I didn't like at all. So let's kick it off with the first movie that I watched in February 2021, which is Shoplifters. So Shoplifters is a Japanese film that I've been wanting to watch for a long time, but I always find it really difficult to watch movies that are in foreign languages and subtitled by myself. So I waited till a bunch of my friends wanted to watch it with me as well, and we sat down and watched it together. This was really interesting, and I've said before that I don't generally like giving star ratings for art because I think my opinion on it can change over time, and I guess the more time has passed, the less I've kind of thought about this film very much or cared about it very much. But my first impression of it was that it was pretty good. It's essentially about a family, but they're not really a family, but a family of like misfit Japanese people who make their money off shoplifting and stealing money and those kinds of things. They're essentially like homeless people, and they're living these really weird lives together, and it's sort of a look at the cyclical nature of poverty and the desperation of people who are poor. Really good subject matter here. There's some good class commentary on how poor people perceive death. Like, one of the characters dies in this movie, and the thought pattern of these people who are poor is just, well, we just have to keep going. Like, there's almost no time to mourn the death of a family member or someone you care about when you're poor, because you just have to focus on surviving. I like this movie a fair bit, but it was pretty long. I think it was about 2 hours, or 130 or 140 minutes long maybe, and it kind of just started dragging a fair bit to the end. There were multiple points where I thought this movie was surely over, but it just kept going, and that kind of annoyed me a bit. But overall, I enjoyed this movie for what it was, and I think it was a pretty good commentary, like I said, on poverty. Okay, so next up was a classic American film that I just, for whatever reason, have never seen, and that is Men in Black. I have definitely seen Men in Black 2 at one point, except I have no memory of what happened in that movie, but I don't think I've ever seen the original Men in Black film, and I'm glad I watched it. It was a really fun sci-fi film. Like, it's nothing amazing, but it's pretty funny. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Will Smith is great in this role. I imagine this was not long after The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and you still kind of get the vibe of that rebellious young Will Smith in this, not taking himself too seriously, but being really confident and really bold and everything like that. Really good special effects for a movie that came out in the late 90s, and a generally enjoyable comedy film. Like I said, it doesn't take itself seriously. It's really fun. It's a great little sci-fi comedy, and I kind of want to rewatch Men in Black 2 and then maybe even the third Men in Black film that came out, but probably not that next Men in Black film that had Liam Hemsworth in it, because apparently that was terrible. But yeah, Men in Black, really enjoyed it, would watch it again, and want to continue watching this series. Number 3 for February, and possibly one of the highlights of this month, was Friday the 13th, a horror movie that is absolutely considered one of the classic slasher films, but I just have never seen. I read a lot about this movie and how when it came out, it was compared a lot to Halloween, a slasher film that I have seen, which is like the classic slasher film. And a lot of people were really critical of this movie because they thought it was really derivative of Halloween. But me watching it, I actually thought this did everything Halloween did, but better. and I thought this was a great horror film for so many reasons. It's extremely suspenseful, the score is really creepy, and the way that the director uses these like fly on the wall shots that, you know, like handheld camera kind of vibes where it almost looks like you are the perpetrator of these gruesome crimes just watching on from afar. Like, I feel like that's how the camera was used, and it's like this voyeuristic, almost perverted spying that the camera is doing, and we're not supposed to be seeing these things that we're seeing. As well as that, it just included gore, which Halloween didn't really do. Like, this movie is like Halloween but with a lot more gore, and I kind of liked seeing the people get killed, not in a weird way, but I think it just added to the drama a bit. And what I find interesting about Friday the 13th, and I want to talk more about this in another video, is that I feel like, as someone who has never seen Friday the 13th or any film in that franchise and knows nothing about it until now, you just assume, based on the pop culture zeitgeist, that Jason Voorhees is the villain in this film. But Jason doesn't actually appear in this series until part 2, really, and he doesn't appear in the trademark hockey mask until part 3, Friday the 13th part 3. And when I figured that out, I was like, wow, because you kind of just know through pop culture that there is a character in some horror movie somewhere that has a hockey mask, and then you kind of know that his name's Jason. You might not know where he's from, but for that to actually only have been in the 3rd iteration of this series speaks wonders to me about like how culturally relevant these films were.
Kill her, mommy!
Because that one from part 3 is the most iconic thing, and I think that is absolutely awesome. There is a huge thing that happens at the end of this movie that is just totally took me by surprise and blew me away, and I thought it was really great, and I really want to look more into it, and I really want to keep watching this series, which is why I then almost immediately the next day watched Friday the 13th part 2. After I watched the first part, I really enjoyed it and wanted to see something that was pretty much exactly the same, and part 2 was definitely the same. But the reason I was so intrigued after doing some research is because the description for the first Friday the 13th film is: camp counselors are stalked and murdered by an unknown assailant while trying to reopen a summer camp that was the site of a child's drowning, which seems like a pretty normal thing. I then looked at all of the Friday the 13th movies, and the most recent one really is called Jason X from 2001, and the synopsis for this one is: in the year 2455, old Earth is now a contaminated planet abandoned for centuries. Yet humans have returned to the deadly place that they once... Anyway, I looked at where it started and then the final iteration of this series, and I was like, how does it get to this? How on earth does this movie become Jason X? And now I've decided that over the next few months, I'm going to watch all of the Friday the 13th movies. Friday the 13th, pretty derivative, but like just fine. Like, it's just a sequel to the first one that pretty much does everything the first one does. I then took a curveball away from horror and sci-fi and fantasy kind of stuff and watched the film High Fidelity from the year 2000, and this was something that someone that I was friends with told me that they thought I would like a lot, and they weren't wrong. I thought this was a really good romantic comedy film that had a really interesting premise and was pretty unique in the way that the main character in this movie breaks the fourth wall a lot and talks directly to the camera. It came out in 2000, but this movie really screams the 90s, which I really liked in terms of the costuming and even like the locations they shot in. Like, all of the apartments looked almost identical to like an apartment from Friends or Seinfeld or something like that. It really brought out a lot of the 90s for me. Not to mention Jack Black's performance in this is an absolute standout. I thought Jack Black was amazing. I can't believe I've never seen this film because School of Rock is one of my favorite films ever, and I am positive that Jack Black's performance in this film had a direct correlation to his casting in School of Rock, because he is so much like the Dewey Finn character in this movie. It's not funny, and there must have been someone watching it being like, yeah, this guy's perfect for the School of Rock. The next film I watched was Godzilla vs. Hedorah, which is also known in the West, localized as Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. Sometimes I just like to watch old Godzilla films from Japan because they are always really cheesy, usually pretty bad, but just like the fun of watching a movie like this is always good. And Godzilla vs. Hedorah sort of ticked all of the boxes that I wanted. Hedorah, the smog monster, is basically... It was actually kind of interesting. Hedorah, the smog monster, is literally a monster of like all the pollution and stuff like that is the problem with the Earth that we are still facing today, and, you know, becomes a huge monster. Godzilla and Hedorah fight. There's never really much to these movies. They always try to fill in the blanks between the two monsters fighting with weird science and other weird plot points, but generally this was, you know, your pretty standard old school Godzilla film. It is amazing how, like, just how obvious it is that Godzilla is just someone in a suit. Like, I realize they didn't have all the special effects that we have now, but it's just funny to see Godzilla so fluidly moving, literally the way a human would move. And I guess I found it interesting that this movie came out in the early 70s, and it must have been a commentary on like environmentalism and like how we're destroying the environment based on the smog monster. But yeah, overall a pretty average film. I probably will watch another Godzilla film soon because they're just so much fun to switch off and have a watch of. Next up was a rewatch of Avengers Age of Ultron. I saw this movie in cinemas when it came out, and to be honest, like, I just had no memory whatsoever of what happened in this film. I must not have been paying attention during it, and because we've been watching WandaVision every Friday here in Australia at our house, we all decided when Melbourne was in a lockdown recently to watch Avengers Age of Ultron again, which is the introduction of the character Wanda and Vision from WandaVision. And man, I really wish I had rewatched this sooner, because this is an incredible entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There is so many cool things going on here, so many great character interactions. Vision is a great character, Wanda is a great character, Ultron is a really well portrayed villain, but also some really soft, somber moments, such as when Black Widow explains to Bruce Banner that she can't have children because she was sterilized at the Assassin Academy, which actually made me cry. This is the first time I have cried in a movie since Click with Adam Sandler, which came out, I think, in 2006. My housemates were looking at me like, whoa, what is going on here? I just couldn't help myself. It was a really sad moment, and it was so brilliantly performed, and of course all of the action towards the end, Pietro's death, spoiler alert, and a bunch of other things. It was cool to get refreshed on all of that, so when I was watching WandaVision it all kind of made sense. Really liked Age of Ultron, and I want to start rewatching a bunch of the old Marvel films as well. The same night that me and my housemates watched Age of Ultron, we also unfortunately watched the movie Dragon Ball Evolution. Now, I always wonder if I'm like bad at movie criticism, because usually if a movie just has a beginning, middle, and end, I tend to be like, yeah, that was fine. That's like a 3 out of 5 stars, I guess. And I'm never really that critical, but maybe it's because I'm just not watching any legitimately bad movies. Like, if you want an example of how a movie can be bad, or what a bad movie looks like in general, go and watch Dragon Ball Evolution right now, because this movie is bad on every single front. I really like Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, so I was kind of thinking, oh, maybe if you're a fan, it kind of works. But no, it doesn't work as a fan or anything at all. The first problem that I have with this movie is just how almost overtly racist its cast choicing is. Like, I think you are making a statement if you predominantly have Asian actors in an adaptation of a Japanese manga and anime, right? But then your 2 lead characters are white. Like, I found that particularly interesting as a choice, like this Hollywood whitewashing of this franchise. The acting is terrible. Goku in it as a character is terrible. Krillin isn't in it at all. Yamcha is in it. And might I just say that whoever played Yamcha, it looked like he just watched Yamcha in the anime and did exactly what Yamcha did in the anime, which I guess sounds like it could be a good thing, but it's not, because anime dialogue doesn't really translate very well to real dialogue and real mannerisms. Like, this is a terrible adaptation. There's an overt sexualization of every single female character in this. And I just thought the special effects were terrible. The lore was terrible. The only thing that redeemed it in any way was I did think that Piccolo, the main antagonist, I thought his design and portrayal was really good. That's the only thing about this movie that I enjoyed. There was nothing else about this that I thought was good. Luckily, it's only like 80 minutes, so you can get it over and done with really quickly. But if you want to watch a bad movie, this is it. After that, I watched the movie Mamma Mia, the ABBA musical. This was another one that we watched in lockdown here in Melbourne, and a really fun musical. Like, the music of ABBA is so universally loved. It's so great to listen to, and while this is a super cheesy film, and it is, you know, it's very camp, but I just thought it was a lot of fun to just see these ABBA songs being sung and performed, and seeing Meryl Streep in such a great performance, Julie Waters in such a great performance, and some really funny singing from Pierce Brosnan, who, I don't know why he was singing the way he was. Maybe that's just how he sings, but his singing performance is really funny. Mamma Mia, really fun musical comedy film that you can watch with a bunch of friends and have a few drinks and just have a good time. I really liked Mamma Mia. Next up, The Little Mermaid, a movie that I have never seen before. And I did some thinking and I realized that there are a lot of classic Disney films that I have never seen in my life. For example, and I'll list a few here, I have never seen Tarzan, The Jungle Book, Beauty and the Beast. I don't think I've seen like Alice in Wonderland, and like just Pocahontas, never seen. A lot of those classic Disney films I've just never seen. So I want to start ticking them off my list. The Little Mermaid is such a fun movie. I feel like I never watched it as a kid just because it was like the girl movie, which is a terrible thing to think, but I think it was definitely like directed more so to girls, but I really loved it. The music is great. Good to see context for a lot of the songs that, you know, I've heard so many times, and good to see this whole story play out. Like, I did know what happens in the story. Like, I think you just pick it up through osmosis just by being alive. But yeah, it was nice to just see it all kind of happen in front of me. And the animation is also amazing, and so is the music. Continuing with watching MCU films, I had never seen Captain Marvel, and there still are a couple MCU films I've never seen, including The Winter Soldier and Thor: The Dark World. Captain Marvel was one I wasn't sure what to make of because a lot of people have been really critical of it that I have spoken to and reviews that I've seen, but honestly, and maybe this comes into what I was saying before, is like I'm not a good film critic, but I actually thought Captain Marvel was really good. For one, she is a really cool superhero with really great powers, and I thought that Brie Larson did an amazing job. I also thought that Samuel L. Jackson being a young dude and being younger and like more in the action was really great, and just seeing the origin of the whole Avengers initiative was really good. Like Nick Fury deciding that this is why the Avengers should exist, and you know, we know what happened after that. I thought Jackson was definitely the standout for me, but the reason that Nick Fury wears the eye patch is explained in this, which was pretty stupid, but also the argument of why couldn't they just call Captain Marvel if she's so strong is sort of explained, and I like that. I like the universe building. I really enjoy the Marvel movies because I think they don't have to be as good and as thought out as they are, especially now, but they still do often maintain just a pretty standard quality of being good movies. So yeah, I thought Captain Marvel was great. Coming up to the last few films here, the next film I watched kind of as a joke is Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates from 2016, starring Zac Efron and Adam Levine. I never know this guy's name. The reason I watched this film was actually an in-joke from my podcast, 20th Century Boy. Basically, I sometimes on that show talk to my cousin Dave. My name is Mike. We found out there was a movie called Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates, and we thought we should definitely watch this movie, and we thought it was okay. It's just a pretty typical like comedy film, like about two misfits who meet, you know, two other girls who are pretending to be like good girls in inverted commas, but are also misfits. They screw up the sister's wedding. I don't know. This is a bit of fun. It's certainly nothing remarkable, but it was a fun watch for a Saturday afternoon. I definitely wouldn't waste an evening on it though. Next up, 2067, an Australian film from 2020 that I watched on Netflix because it came up on my recommended at the top of the screen. And often I'm very particular about the movies I choose to watch, and I don't really just watch a movie without knowing anything about it. But this one I literally just saw and I was like, whatever, it's like, it's 100 minutes, I'll just put it on and lie in bed and watch it. And this movie was really interesting. It's a time travel movie, again, Australian, like dystopian world where there are no longer plants on Earth and people need to like breathe through artificial oxygen, and they want to go back in time to stop that from happening, I guess. I didn't think any of the acting was particularly strong in this at all, and that was kind of what sort of let it down for me. But I thought conceptually there was a lot going on here in terms of like science fiction and time travel that I thought was pretty good. So I'm glad I gave this a chance. I'm glad I watched it, and I feel like if it had a lot more money in it, this could be a really interesting story. Well, it is an interesting story, but I don't know if it was executed as well as it could have been if it was like a big budget film. But for what it was, like, this was a pretty enjoyable sci-fi film. Like, not the best, definitely not the worst. Two more. The second last one is Lights Out, a horror film, I think from 2014. Thinking back to a horror film like Friday the 13th, which I talked about earlier, Friday the 13th, they don't make horror movies as suspenseful as that anymore. Genuinely, I thought, wow, this is so remarkable. Lights Out is a good kind of concept for a horror film, and the way that they use the cinematography to illustrate the danger in this, which is essentially a monster that only appears when the lights are out. And I enjoyed the switching of the lights where you could see the monster and couldn't see the monster. It's about an 80-minute film. It's pretty short. There's not much like development of anything grand. It's a pretty standard like monster film, but a bit of fun, a few jump scares, and like enjoyable nonetheless. Definitely not perfect, but a fun film. And finally, the last movie I watched, another horror film, watched a lot of horror this month, was Ready or Not, a 2019 horror film. This one, much better than Lights Out, but yeah, a really great film, essentially where a bride is involved with her new husband's family in a game of hide and seek in which the family are trying to kill her, and maybe more of a thriller than a horror, like lots of just intensity and fear. And the lead actress, Samara Weaving, who I believe is an Australian actress, just did an unbelievable job at this. This was one of the finest horror movie performances I've ever seen, and every way that she was reacting to everything that happened, I was like, this is exactly how you would react in that situation. Like, this is incredible acting, great theme, a really good orchestral, like, classical score, and some really eerie, like, Baroque, vampire-y, like Addams Family kind of vibes. The family ends up being a Satanist family, which is also really creepy. Genuine fear at a few points in this movie, and it was really enjoyable. Those are the movies that I watched in February 2021. Next month, obviously, I will do a follow-up for March. I've already started watching movies this month, so I've already got a couple up my sleeve. But I want to start a new thing. Comment on this video, thumbs up, and subscribe, and comment a movie that you want me to watch this month and review in the next video. So if there's a movie you really want me to watch, definitely put it in the comments below. I will choose one and I will talk about it on the next episode of what I watched. But for now, please check out some of my other videos. Some of them are on screen now, and subscribe to my channel. Get me up to the 1,000. That'd be awesome. And yeah, tune in for what I watched next month for March. And yeah, my name's been Radio Mike, and this has been The Inside of My Mind. Catch you later.
But I went to run my hand through your hair and I noticed you were attached to string. You were a puppet this whole time, you were attached to string.